following program was made possible by a grant from the PG&E Better Together Giving Program, the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education, Arts Collaborative, and the Monday Club. The 20th century was a time of immense transformation for women. They were discovering that they could have a powerful voice outside of marriage and family. With strength in numbers and newfound courage, women's clubs organized and would sweep the nation by the turn of the century. Their overriding mission was to be a catalyst for change, justice, and community life.
Women in San Luis Obispo County were also caught up in the movement.
The building of the Monday Club would be forged by the work of many. There was Queenie Warden, who built a successful women's network only to see it fail.
Yet the end of one club would see the emergence of another club that would endure, the Monday Club.
Our clubhouse was designed by a brilliant woman who, despite facing overwhelming obstacles, would not give up on her dream.
Julia Morgan, a trailblazing female architect, would construct the home for the dynamic women's club that stands today.
We are honored to be the caretakers of this clubhouse, the last building designed for women by Julia Morgan.
Our clubhouse is a special place that brings women together. It represents a movement that enabled women to shape and influence their communities, the world, beyond their homes and family.
This is the story of the Monday Club and the women who built it.
Early in the morning on April 18, 1906, San Francisco was jolted awake by violent shaking. Lasting 40 seconds, the earthquake crumbled buildings and buckled streets. The quake broke cast iron water pipes all over the city. Firefighters watched helplessly as the inferno spread and burned for 3 days. Thousands of people died and about 28,000 buildings were left in ruins. Thick, billowing smoke darkened the sun as Julia Morgan made her way to her office through the rubble. It had taken years of setbacks and hardships for Julia to arrive at this moment. As a young woman, Julia refused to accept marriage as her only future path. She graduated from UC Berkeley's College of Engineering with honors. Then she did something even more shocking for a young woman. She set her sights on the most prestigious school in the world to study architecture, the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Her time in Paris was exhilarating as well as devastating. After hundreds of years of barring women from studying at the École, the doors were now open to female students. However, the faculty made it very clear that women were not wanted. Julia found out that the faculty had purposely given her a failing low score to prevent her from passing the entrance exam. Their reason? They did not want to encourage young girls to apply to the school. They believed that they had to protect the art of architecture from the inferior effect of women in their profession. The deception did the opposite. Julia was determined to gain entry. After 4 attempts at the exams, she was the first woman to gain entrance to the École des Beaux-Arts architecture program. She ranked 13th out of 392 applicants. On average, it took a man 6 years to complete the program, if he did at all, and many did not. Julia would complete the program in 3 years. During her time at Beaux-Arts, Julia gained extensive architectural knowledge and became a very skilled pen and ink artist. These theater and staircase drawings were Julia's final student works. Julia Morgan was the first woman to graduate from the world-renowned architecture program at the École des Beaux-Arts. Julia returned to San Francisco and quickly began working on several commissions. In 1904, she achieved another first. Julia passed the State Board's examination and became the first licensed female architect in California. With that accomplishment, she opened her own firm simply called Julia Morgan Architect. As she gazed upon the ash and rubble of her beloved city of San Francisco, Julia must have felt crushed. And yet the terrible earthquake would present career-changing opportunities. A few years earlier, Julia designed El Campanile, a 72-foot-tall, 5-story bell tower at Mills College in Oakland. She used reinforced concrete, a modern technique she had studied while in France. Incredibly, the reinforced concrete technology had enabled the El Campanile bell tower to survive the quake unscathed. Back in San Francisco, the call rang out to rebuild. Julia Morgan's El Campanile success put her in the spotlight. She was hired to rebuild the glamorous Fairmont Hotel. The quake had shifted the foundation, and the interior was gutted by fire. Many questioned whether a woman was capable of engineering and supervising such a difficult renovation. From climbing rickety ladders and making her way across high scaffolding, Julia inspected every detail herself. However, she made one cultural concession for fashion purposes. Since women were expected to wear skirts, Julia added a pair of trousers underneath her dress when she was on a job site. Just 1 year later and under budget, the new Fairmont Hotel reopened on the anniversary of the earthquake. The Fairmont was a triumph for the city, and it secured Julia Morgan's reputation as a premier architect and civil engineer in California. Her business took off. During her career, she would design more than 700 buildings of all types. Julia Morgan was a trailblazing female architect whose path would soon lead to San Luis Obispo. In 1909, the Women's Civic Club in San Luis Obispo was launched as just one of thousands of women's organizations throughout the country. Eventually, there would be others, including El Pomar, Paso Robles, and Atascadero women's clubs. However, the Women's Civic Club of San Luis Obispo would be the largest and very influential. Most women's clubs focused on studying literature, music, and self-improvement. These clubs allowed women to share ideas and helped them realize that their thoughts were important and that together they could act on them. San Luis Obispo would have an active book club, as well as a home culture club. Soon, clubs moved from self-improvement to civic involvement with the goal to create a better community.
The Women's Civic Club, although less than 4 months in the field, has become an active influence for civic betterment and is rapidly forging ahead to a harvest of results.
The ladies launched a campaign to beautify the city and encourage homeowners to remove weeds. They protested against a garbage pile near Monterey Street and Paso Robles Road, and took on the renovation of El Triangulo Park near the train depot. The new women's club grew out of 2 meeting places very quickly, and the need for a home would become an important goal.
Who will give the ladies a lot for their clubhouse? Is there a public-minded man who has the means in San Luis Obispo who is willing to donate a lot of land for the construction of a modern club home for women? That is the question that the Women's Civic Club would like answered.
The question went unanswered, and it would be another 10 years before the Women's Civic Club would create a grand clubhouse in San Luis Obispo. 2 of Julia Morgan's most prestigious projects would come from her relationship with Phoebe Apperson Hearst and her son, William Randolph Hearst. Phoebe Hearst was a very wealthy widow, having taken over the mining interests accumulated by her late husband, George Hearst. She was a philanthropist, especially for the betterment of women and children. If you went to kindergarten, you can thank Phoebe Hearst. Phoebe was also behind the formation of a new organization called the PTA, the Parent and Teacher Association. At the new University of California at Berkeley, Phoebe paid for the campus master plan and architectural design of the entire campus and the construction of many of its buildings. In the early 1900s, women were leaving rural farms for the big city. What worried activists like Phoebe was the lack of suitable housing for these women in the city. Phoebe Hearst supported the work of the Young Women's Christian Association, or YWCA. Their mission was to provide safe housing and vocational education for women. Phoebe Hearst was impressed with Julia's spectacular career path from Beaux-Arts student to San Francisco architect. Phoebe hired Julia to design a special YWCA conference center called Asilomar. This would be one of 30 YWCA buildings Julia would design in her career.
Beginning in 1913, Julia Morgan spent 16 years designing 12 buildings at Asilomar in Pacific Grove. It is an excellent example of the arts and crafts movement. She incorporated the natural landscape, keeping trees in place and accommodating the terrain. Open spaces and natural light abound, with a focus on craftsmanship.
Around the same time as Asilomar, Julia began working with Phoebe's son, the newspaper mogul William Randolph Hearst.
Mr. Hearst was a bigger-than-life character and a very successful businessman.
It gets just as hot in Alaska as it does most any other place this time of the year, but nobody worries about it, least of all the girls.
At the peak of his fortune, he owned 28 newspapers, 18 magazines, several radio stations, a movie studio, and many elaborate properties. Mr. Hearst asked Julia Morgan to build him a little something in the hills of San Simeon. He was tired of camping in tents. He estimated the job would take about 6 months. Miss Morgan and Mr. Hearst would collaborate on the estate for 28 years.
The Women's Civic Club of San Luis Obispo continued to grow. At the time, it was considered the oldest and largest women's organization in the county. Queenie Warden, wife of H.M. Warden, an early entrepreneur in San Luis Obispo, became president of the club in 1914. Queenie was a formidable presence in the city. In 1896, she joined the Political Equality Club and was most likely in attendance when Susan B. Anthony came to San Luis Obispo to rally women around the right to vote. Queenie Warden ran for mayor of San Luis Obispo in 1917 and lost by a small margin, just 76 votes. The goal of attaining a clubhouse had languished for years until Queenie, an energized club president, galvanized the women to renovate the old Pavilion Theater. It was an expensive undertaking costing $20,000, which would be about $373,000 today. When completed, the building was renamed the Women's Civic Auditorium. It had 2 stories, a tea room, and a large auditorium with 1,000 seats. It would become a cultural hub for the city with concerts, lectures, banquets, a flower show, and even moving pictures. The first 4 San Luis Obispo County fairs were staged in the Women's Club Civic Auditorium.
I cannot commend too highly the public-spirited women who are responsible for this building. It seems as if the hand of a magician has created a wonderful transformation in this structure, which I can barely believe was the old pavilion.
For several years, the Women's Civic Auditorium was home for many community activities, but trouble was brewing about the club's debt. Apparently, Queenie Warden had been financing many of the club's activities with the expectation that she would be paid back. The club members either did not agree to the reimbursement or simply did not have the means to pay.
Order! Order! As president of this club, I denounce the unscrupulous activities of several of our members.
Queenie, stop.
This meeting is out of order.
This is outrageous. I move to expel these members for disloyalty to the president and the club.
Disloyalty to the president?
You can't do that. It's against the bylaws.
What is she talking about?
In May 1923, the club had a stormy meeting with Queenie Warden attempting to expel 3 members whom she accused of disloyalty to the president and the work of the club. By July, the club had appointed 7 local businessmen to advise them about their financial affairs. A few weeks later, a notice was printed in the local paper.
A special meeting of the Women's Civic Club is being held this afternoon at the clubhouse to consider ways and means of straightening out the tangled maze of the organization's affairs.
In September 1923, Queenie Warden took the Women's Civic Club to court to recover $10,000 in debt. She won her case.
A deed conveying the Women's Civic Club building and property at the corner of Toro and Monterey Streets has been given to Mrs. Queenie Warden. Transfer of the property is a step in the straightening out of the somewhat tangled financial affairs of the Women's Civic Club.
Julia Morgan's work at La Cuesta Encantada, now commonly known as Hearst Castle, was well underway.
We are building a sort of village on a mountaintop, housing his collections as well as his family.
Mr. Hearst was a ravenous collector, and his tastes were eclectic. He had gems from ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. He bought antique ceilings, tapestries, furniture, and church pews. 4 Egyptian sculptures from about 1500 BC comprise an exterior fountain designed by Julia Morgan. As a student at Beaux-Arts, Julia studied the ancient classics and then translated these inspirations into original designs for a modern century. Julia's Beaux-Arts training served her well at Hearst Castle. The facades and rooms often featured art objects and details from different regions and centuries. It was Julia's job to bring all of these elements together in harmony as if they had always been meant to play together. Mr. Hearst was not an easy client. He would often make changes that were costly and create headaches for Julia Morgan. Yet he had tremendous respect for her skills, and he would often acquiesce when she objected to a change. He was the chief, though, and she did her best to interpret his wants and give him the grand estate he desired. Miss Morgan and William Randolph Hearst would collaborate on the Hilltop Mansion for 28 years.
After winning the court case against the Women's Civic Club, the deed to the beloved auditorium was handed over to Queenie Warden, satisfying the debt owed. Having endured several years of infighting and a budgetary showdown, the ability to be a club was no more. The Women's Civic Club dissolved, ending a 15-year career in San Luis Obispo.
Whether the club will reorganize is still problematic, but leaders say that no move to that end will be taken for some months.
With the end of the Women's Civic Club and its corporation, the question was, what now? Many of the details are lost to time, but during the summer of 1924, there were discussions between the members of the book club and the Home Culture Club about the future of women organizing in San Luis Obispo. Grace Barnberg was the secretary and treasurer of the book club. She was well known for her work with the Red Cross and leadership to support the war effort. She organized dental clinics for children and was a strong voice for a health center in the city. At the height of its influence, the Women's Civic Club was a successful organization in the city and county. Any woman who wanted to be involved in the betterment of the community would most likely be a member of the club. It's probable that Grace was a member of the former Women's Club and motivated to find a way to reorganize a women's network in the city. But she had to find a way to overcome the previous club's disastrous legacy. Many women had purchased lifetime memberships for $36, which would be about $600 today. These lifetime memberships were now worthless. They had raised money for years to build a civic auditorium, only to lose it in a court case. It seemed that the women wanted to start anew and have a clean cut from the past. Grace reached out to the Federation of Women's Clubs for advice and heard back from its president.
I think any women's club that is organized there should avoid the name civic, since it has had an unfortunate connection in that community. I would advocate, of course, the participation of any women's club in civic work, but I would suggest calling it, say, the Friday Afternoon Club.
After 2 preliminary meetings, 24 members of the book club and the Home Culture Club met at the home of Mrs. H.P. Kirtland.
Ladies, the time has come to make a decision. Are we going to have a women's club in our great city?
The women decided to give it another try and organize a new club. After several more meetings, the ladies drafted a constitution and agreed on a name, the Monday Club. One of the first major campaigns for the new Monday Club was to erect electric light arches with the words San Luis Obispo over the entrances to town. This photo features a water tank being pulled down the street. and right above is one of the signs donated by the Monday Club. The club's beautification efforts took to seed in 1928.
The Monday Club's nasturtium seeds are sprouting. The Golden City, San Luis Obispo, will be golden in reality in a few more weeks when these acres of nasturtiums burst into bloom.
Growing the membership was important, and they found many ways to convince women to join.
Did you know that each member is expected to bring in 2 new members this fall? Desirable members, mind you. I mean, women of brain and sense who stand for something in this town. There are lots of them, and we need them. The fact is, we need 500 members this year, and you need not laugh because we are out to get them.
By 1928, the Monday Club had 350 members, and soon they would turn their efforts to creating a home for their organization. During the 20s, Hearst was busy entertaining his many media and Hollywood friends at the estate, even though it was still under construction. Julia traveled to San Simeon usually twice a month. The trip entailed an 8-hour train ride from San Francisco to San Luis Obispo and 2 hours in a taxi to San Simeon. Her office records indicate that she made this exhausting trip 568 times. Hearst Castle is grand and monumental and occupied much of Julia's time, but it was project number 503 in her inventory, and there would be an additional 200 buildings of all types before she retired. Many of her other projects were for women. Julia enjoyed overseeing the massive Hearst Castle project, but she also appreciated the details of much simpler designs and budgets.
Don't ever turn down a job because it is beneath you or because you want to do something larger.
In the early 1900s, there was a serious housing shortage for young women flocking to cities for work. YWCAs and other women's clubs provided safe lodging along with vocational training. Julia became a trusted architect for many of these organizations. Some of her best-known designs are the Berkeley Women's City Club, Oakland YWCA, the Chinatown YWCA in San Francisco, and another YWCA in Honolulu, Hawaii. Mrs. Cecil B. DeMille, wife of the legendary film director, was the head of the building committee for the Hollywood Studio Club, which would be home to thousands of young women flocking to the area in hopes of making it in motion pictures. For $15 a month, a young woman received 2 meals a day and could remain up to 3 years. Kim Novak, Rita Moreno, and Marilyn Monroe all lived for a while at the Hollywood Studio Club, designed by Julia Morgan. For years, Grace Barnberg and the other members of the Monday Club had been fundraising for a clubhouse. Members held rummage sales, card parties, fashion shows, and dinners. Some even shined the shoes of businessmen at a stand on the corner of Monterey and Chorro Streets. By 1932, the club's 350 members had purchased a lot on Monterey Street, and it was time to construct a building.
Grace Barnberg was friends with Steve Zagar, a taxi driver who developed quite a business driving Julia and other guests to San Simeon.
Miss Morgan and Mr. Zagar became fast friends on the long, bumpy rides to San Simeon.
Sometime in early 1932, Grace asked Steve to speak with Julia on one of those drives about the Monday Club, and it worked. Julia was interested in creating a new home for the Monday Club.
Despite the fact that the Monday Club had a very limited budget of only $16,000, Miss Morgan designed this beautiful clubhouse for us. She was so benevolent that she ultimately waived her design fee.
These blueprints are dated August 1933, and by 1934, the build was completed. The Monday Club had a new home. This is the social hall of Asilomar, designed by Julia Morgan as a YWCA conference center. The acclaimed arts and crafts style estate is considered to be one of Julia Morgan's masterpieces.
This is the main hall of the Monday Club. We can see that Julia has continued her brilliant style found at Asilomar into the design of the Monday Club. The interior is an airy gathering place with the space flowing into rooms opening from the sides. It incorporates arts and crafts elements with a simple but elegant wood ceiling and exposed wood trusses that showcase the building's structure. The adjoining rooms have large windows with lots of light, complementing the loquat tree frescoes that live on the interior walls. The murals were painted by Doris Day, a female artist from San Francisco Julia often hired for her projects. The stage is perfectly practical for club meetings, as well as concerts, presentations, and parties of all kinds. Julia considered a fireplace to be the soul of a building. For the Monday Club, she incorporated a fieldstone mantel and hearth. Outside, the building is a typical Julia Morgan fusion, California mission style and old world charm. The arched door is Mediterranean-inspired, and the red clay roof is in keeping with California's heritage. It is a design that is warm and welcoming, from the charming loquat trees to the beautiful herringbone patterned wood floor. In classic arts and crafts style, Julia designed a building that is in harmony with its environment. The architectural design reflects its proud position in our community, all the while being welcoming and hospitable. It would be the perfect home for Monday Club activities, and it would be the last women's building that Julia Morgan, architect, would design in her career.
Today, a Monday Club meeting is just as energetic as it was 100 years ago. Necessary renovations and upgrades have been made over the last century, but much of the building is still original. The Chinese lanterns in the hall became too fragile and were replaced. One lantern remains, and the club plans to make reproductions to display. In 2018, the club began a $1.2 million capital campaign to restore the building and grounds. Many of the improvements are behind the walls, such as electrical and plumbing upgrades and a much-needed air conditioning system. Today, the Monday Club supports local causes benefiting women and children and those dedicated to enhancing the educational, civic, and the cultural life of the San Luis Obispo community. During her long career, Julia Morgan rarely gave interviews. She did not want to stand out as simply being a female architect. She wanted her work to stand on its own merits. However, reluctance to be in the spotlight also resulted in her tremendous contributions to be overlooked, even forgotten. In 1957, Life magazine had a 17-page spread detailing Hearst Castle, which was becoming a state park open to visitors. Nowhere in the article is Julia Morgan mentioned. It has only been the last few decades that researchers have brought to light her brilliant legacy of architectural design.
100 years ago, the concept of a building for the Monday Club was born. Today, we are honored to be the conservators of this wonderful clubhouse and its legacy to Julia Morgan and the founders of our club.
In the early 1900s, the formation of women's clubs occurred all over the country. These clubs allowed women who had little political standing or voice at the time to gain greater influence in the betterment of their communities. In San Luis Obispo, the blossoming of a women's club had a rocky start, but 100 years later, the Monday Club is still actively engaged in the community.
The Monday Club's a terrific way to meet interesting and dynamic women. We're an inclusive, civil-minded, and charitable organization. The club supports projects that improve the quality of life throughout San Luis Obispo County. The Monday Club welcomes new members who have the time and energy to support our mission.
Today, the Monday Club building is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and in 2014, Julia Morgan was honored with another first. She became the first female architect to earn the gold medal from the American Institute of Architects, the profession's highest honor. The Monday Club is proud to honor the legacy of Julia Morgan and to be the caretaker of the last women's building she designed and constructed.